They started with the
decoration. You're going to be decorated. And last year we went on November.
A lot more after this week.
We always make it friends.
I'm ready.
You're very welcome.
The grandfather. He didn't say grandfather. That's something.
Thank you.
This and that.
When we went there.
That's right. It's been lately.
Rather than separate.
Famous authoress Sue Gossett, Audie Murphy story. Hi, Sue.
Announcements first. Tonight, Johnny Meeks will be performing in Galleria 1, which is the dealer's room. So he'll be there tonight from 7 till 10. And also in room 517, one of the film rooms, we are showing Nightmare Alley with Colleen Gray. And that starts at 2 p.m., so right after this. If you want to see Nightmare Alley with Colleen, it's at room 517. Okay, let's get on with this, okay? The first two guests are friends of mine that I met a few years ago. And they kind of took me in like a stray dog. And I've been to their home in LA. I've been to their places in New York. And these two people have been like family to me. And I love them very much. And I want them to know that. You know them. Carla was in Texas, Falcon Crest. Mr. Donald May, Coke 45 and the Roaring 20s. Let's welcome both Carla Borelli and Donald May. Okay, the next guest, it's been a real treat. I met her a few years ago, but I didn't get to know her until this weekend. And her and her husband Fritz have been just so nice, and it's been a lot of fun having both of them here as our guests. And Colleen, if you remember movies like The Beach Woman, Red River, it's been terrific having her here. Let's welcome Colleen Gray. Our next guest, I've known her, I guess, for about 2 years now. And every time I'm with her, we have a lot of laughs. We're always laughing about something. And this weekend, we've had quite a few laughs together. And you best know her from Blue Denim and, of course, the Poseidon Adventure. My friend, Lynley. And the next guest, this next lady, I could sit and listen to for hours. The stories that she has to tell, and just listening to this lady is remarkable. And I am so privileged to be with her this past weekend. Marsha Hunt. let's go ahead and start with the audience. Any questions out there in the audience, or do you need some warming up? No? Yes, in the back there.
Carol, I think you mentioned, I think I asked you earlier this week, did you do your own singing of the morning after in the Poseidon Adventure? You said that you did. Any reason why they cut that song so short? It was a very abbreviated version.
Yeah, and he's asking about the song The Morning After, why it was cut short, and did Carol do her own singing?
I'm the person who can answer this question. Yes, I did do my own singing when we were filming, and after the movie they wanted to do a record version of that song, and I didn't like that particular interpretation of it, so they got Maureen McGovern to do it. She did a great job, and it was a great success. The movie, in the movie, the song was not altered one note from the way it was written, because when I rehearsed it for 2.5 weeks with the guys who wrote it, the Kasha brothers, they explained to me that in order to get nominated for a song in a motion picture, you had to have so many bars of music per frame. It's very complicated, and I still don't quite get it. So it was written so that you would have so many bars of music, that you would have so many picture images, frames, and then the music, and it was nominated for an Oscar, and it won, which amazed me, but that's the story of that song. So it was not altered in any way from the day it was originally written.
I didn't mean to imply that it was altered. It was an abbreviated version.
No, that was the version.
Well, you sang just a few lines, and all of a sudden, Roddy McDowell and someone else was engaged in conversation.
Well, that's what I was saying, that in order to qualify for an Academy Award, you have to have so many bars of music per frames of film. That's their rules, not mine, believe me.
Colleen, as I mentioned earlier, at 2 p.m. today, we're showing Nightmare Alley. And you did that with Tyrone Power. What are your memories about working with Tyrone Power?
Well, Tyrone Power has to be the most handsome, romantic, lovely gentleman that I've ever had the privilege to work with. And, well, I know that when I was 16, I was in love with him, and all my girlfriends were too. And I think every woman in the audience here today must have a romantic feeling about this man. It was perfectly all right to feel that way and still be married as I was. But he was a gentleman, kind, everybody loved him. And it is a tribute to his memory that every year in November there's a ceremony at his graveside in Hollywood, because people remember him as they do Rudolph Valentino in a way. But he had no enemies that I know of. Everybody, he was very kind, very considerate, and the way he had an aura about him that I have not noticed with any other male performer. I don't know how to explain it, except that when he walked on the stage, especially in the tuxedo, if you go to see the movie this afternoon, which I hope you will, when he wore the tuxedo as a mentalist, coming on the stage, his posture and his bearing, it was as if that he kind of, well, he didn't glow, but I mean, it just seemed that way. And I thought, I had the feeling that his feet did not touch the stage floor, that he was walking about this far off the stage. That's not true, of course, but that's my impression of him. So you can say that I had a very good and high impression of him, and I enjoyed working with him every single second.
Who else was in the cast?
Oh, it was a marvelous cast. It was an all-star cast as far as principals and character actors. In this, Joan Blondell and Helen Walker, Mike Mazurki, all manner of people, and each part is a gem. There are about 3 pictures that I don't want to mention the other 3, but this particular one pay attention to all the parts because they're all done well, and every part is a starring part, I think. They're done so well. It's a joy to have all those fine actors to work with and watch their artistry.
Okay, questions? Yes, the gentleman in blue.
Yesterday you talked about on the blacklist. Was there any particular reason why they singled you out? You weren't the only actors who were involved in different groups. But did they seem to single you out when they put you on the blacklist?
The question is about being blacklisted for Marsha.
What reason would they have had?
The question was, why was I blacklisted when so many others who made other gestures, similar ones, to protest the blacklist were not, to protest the hearings in Washington? I don't know the answer to that. I know that most, at least, of the fellow actors who were on that volunteer flight to Washington to defend our industry did continue working. Now, what was done or said to make that possible, I don't know. There was not an automatic cutoff of employment for all of us who flew, but we were suddenly, from defending our industry, we were suspect. We were attacked in editorials and gossip columns, and I think what probably sealed my fate was that in 1950, I was in New York doing Broadway plays, and a lot of television, in the infancy of dramatic television. I was in the first Shakespeare, for instance, that was telecast coast to coast live and in 1949. And in 1950, something called Red Channels came out, and that was the privately published pamphlet that attacked a number of people in the broadcast fields of radio and television, listing their a few activities under each name that the pamphleteers didn't like. And the implication was that we were red because of the title Red Channels. He was very careful not to call any of us a communist because by that time that was a libelous term. And several activities of mine were listed under my name. I think I may have been the only, perhaps the only movie name in that group because it was published in New York and about broadcasting. I was doing lots of broadcasting then. I was simply a vocal liberal and with no interest in communism, but that did it. I think the studios who were on the defensive then after the hearings in Washington wanted to prove what loyal studio heads they were, and they didn't quite know how to go up, but they had fired the Hollywood 10, who had been convicted of contempt of Congress for upholding the First Amendment. And when Red Channels came out, I think the studio heads thought, that's what we'll do, we'll get lists, and then we'll know whom to keep out of our productions. And since I was so honored by being in Red Channels, I think that's probably what sealed my fate. That's a long answer, but it's a complicated subject.
Carla, now on Thursday, with panel discussion we're having, we mentioned how you and Don met. But how many times have you and Don worked together?
Actually, a good. The man can count. We've done several plays together. We've done several plays together in Canada, in California. We did a wonderful Pirandello play in Los Angeles, New Jersey, Florida. We did do the show Falcon Crest together, although our storylines did not coincide at all. I adore working with Don on stage because
There's a certain aura. I walk about this
Yeah.
bar.
no, he's No, what you have to know, what you have to know is that when you're on stage or when you're on a set, there isn't that girl-boy courtesy. I mean, the guys are out there looking for their key light and, you know, just like the women. And what Don does is that he helps you, he showcases you, he knows where the focus of the story is, and he knows he can always grab his moment if he has to. So I adore working with him, and we don't necessarily look for projects together, but it's okay when it happens. Oh, that's right. We did a film, a Bob Altman film together, O.C. and Stiggs. We played husband and wife in that. Yes. So it's been television, theater, and film.
And also, I think there was another film about a couple of years ago.
No, that wasn't.
He doesn't want to talk about that one. Questions from the audience? Mr. Bill Black.
Hi, I missed the panel the other day, unfortunately, and I would like to ask Don if he could relate some stories about the incidents that happened that catapulted him into the lead on Colt 45, and maybe some commentary on why the program did not continue another season.
Okay,
One of my favorites.
the question is for Don. It's about how Don got on to Colt 45 and the dismissal of Wade Preston.
Yeah, I've mentioned that story several times. I was signed to a contract at Warner Brothers, and I was doing stuff. And there was a difference of opinion between Wade Preston and Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers won out, and so they replaced him summarily with me. And that's how I came to do that series. And with regard to the series going off the air, there was a difference of opinion between ABC and Warner Brothers at the same time. ABC was pressing for a little better quality, better writing, and Warner Brothers, through the voice of Bill Orr, who was Jack Warner's son-in-law, said, "Don't argue with success." And so ABC said, well, we want certain conditions met. If you don't, we're going to summarily dismiss this series. And so the first one that was dismissed was the Roaring Twenties. And as those options came up, they were dismissed and taken off the air, and it was really the demise of Warner Brothers Television. The only series that stayed on the air were Maverick and I believe Cheyenne. So.
Carol, the movie Harlow. I believe there was a person that was first cast as your mother.
Yes.
Tell us about that story.
We shot it in something called Electronovision, which didn't work. And you rehearsed it for 3 weeks like a play, and then you went into a studio and shot it like live TV, and then it was tape transferred to film. It didn't work. But I spent 3 weeks rehearsing with Judy Garland, who was playing my mother, and I got to know her very well. And I loved her. She was great. She was a funny woman, great sense of humor, and just absolutely terrific lady. And the day before we were starting to shoot, Judy sort of at the end of the day said, "Carol, I'm leaving. I want you to know I think this is a piece of," and I know Mike, and they're going to say because I'm Judy Garland that I'm ill and I'm crazy and whatever, but I just want you to know that I think this is awful. And I went home and I thought, well, she's testing me. You know, I mean, I've heard she could be difficult, this is a test. But the next day, we started filming with Ginger Rogers, who walked in and did the first day shooting with absolutely no rehearsals or anything like that, and just did 3 really concentrated days of hard work, and did such a great job that nobody could even consider her anybody else in that part, you know. You asked.
Someone that's not on this panel right now, and I just want everyone to say thank you for her being here, is Jane Withers, and she's right over there. Let's thank her for being here. Okay, questions? Any questions? Yes. The question is if, this is to Carla, about her commercial work.
Yes, I have. I must own up. I did a lot of commercials between 1960 and 1980, and it was the time when they would hire people for campaigns, which they do very little now, and I would do commercials for 7, 8, 10 years. Some of them were figurines, Tab campaign, Clairol, Alberto VO5, rain barrel fabric softener. I actually started doing commercials when I was 9 months old, so you can imagine how long I've been doing them. It was a wonderful time. I had an opportunity to work with some of the best directors and cinematographers who then went on to do film and television, so it was a lovely entree.
And Colleen, another great classic, in my opinion, was a movie called The Killing. Stanley Kubrick. What was that like?
Oh my. That's better. No, it's not. You do it.
Is it on? Oh, good. Well, The Killing happens to be another one of those pictures that I refer to as having every character a gem. And it was a joy to do it. Stanley Kubrick was sort of unknown at that time, and I had, before working on this, we went to see a picture of his called Killer's Kiss, which he filmed with his wife and a photographer, a cameraman, in New York. Catch as catch can. And it took about 9 months to film, and it was a masterpiece in black and white. I was tremendously impressed with this man's artistry. So when I met him, here I found this little kind of a shrimpy guy with dark, heavy black hair, and he wore army fatigues and clodhopper shoes. Clodhopper shoes are very popular these days. That's what I call them. You know what I mean? Anyway, he was very quiet, didn't do much direction. I was waiting to be directed, and it was not really, it was very minimal. But it was fun watching him with other people. He was very quiet, and he moved around like a little mouse in a way. And whatever his alchemy was, it certainly showed on the screen. And I can only say, you know, Marie Windsor should have had the billing in that. She was absolutely tremendous. And Elisha Cook and all those great characters. It's an actor's picture. I mean, it's just a joy to watch. And Timothy Carey, the man that killed the horse when he bared his fangs like that, I thought he was wonderful. So it was a fine experience.
Okay, questions? Any questions out there from the audience? Yes, sir.
Donald, did you do any other Western stuff besides Code 45?
Okay, the question is to Donald if he did any other Westerns besides Code 45.
Yeah, I did one at Disney called The Tenderfoot, and I think that's it. Other than doing other Westerns on the Warner Brothers lot. I did those segments of it.
Now, talking about Warner Brothers lot, when you first arrived on the lot, how much action was going on there? How much shooting? It was a pretty busy studio, wasn't it?
Yes, the contract with ABC was, with Warner Brothers, was filled 7.5 hours a week. That's an extraordinary contract when you think about it. So we were shooting on the lot 9 series every day. So the back lot was filled with pilgrims and sailors and bushwhackers, and cowboys and Indians, and all manner of background people and people who were headlining series. But the place was jumping. You couldn't move. I rode through my set, had a shot on a horse and I'm shooting everybody. And I rode in on Will Hutchins' set and I was shooting him. And we were all shooting each other. And it was, and with Wade dressing up above and an airplane flying over, it made for a merry old time. But at the same time, all that television work was going on. There was a lot of films being made there. They were doing the interiors there, and those lucky people were off on location, but we were all in the back lot.
I think one of the first times you went to the commissary, you remember a story about someone wanting to sit down?
Yeah, they named a sandwich after me, so I was eating a Donald May there, and a guy came up and said, "Do you mind if I sit down?" I looked up, it was Gary Cooper.
Oh.
And I said, "You mind? Sit down, you can have my wife too." So I had lunch with Gary Cooper.
Okay, question. Yes, Sue.
What's in your sandwich?
Yeah, what kind of sandwich was it?
Ham, what else?
Okay, questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, on the Colt 45, they did bring out a comic book that had pictures at the time of Wade Prescott on the cover. Did they bring out, after he left, did they keep on bringing out the comic book with your picture on there? You know?
The question is, was there a Code 45 comic with Donald?
No, not to my knowledge. Who knows?
Marsha, if everybody hadn't seen this book yet, there's a book called The Way We Wore, W-O-R-E, Styles of the 30s and the 40s. Tell us about the book and how that came about, and you putting that together.
Thank you. Well, everyone else seems to have done a story of his or her life. This is quite different, and it came about because I did so many fashion posings when I was starting out in films, and also at MGM. And every time I did a sitting, standing, whatever, the studio would give me a set of those pictures, and I would put them away in their manila envelope and forget about them, stack them all with old scripts in a back closet where I kept the luggage. Never opened those envelopes, never thought about them again for about half a century. And then a major shopping center where I live in Sherman Oaks in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles had a grand opening, and the theme of its opening was the black and white movies of the 30s and 40s. And I suddenly remembered those were the very years when I was doing so many fashion pictures. And so I offered a chance to look at the styles, the actual styles that were taken then from that period. And the shopping center, the Galleria, was so delighted that they not only said, "Yes, would you," but made me honorary chairman of the event with 3 charities. Out of that came being the honorary mayor of Sherman Oaks. So those pictures have really paid off. But they got such attention at the opening of this shopping center. So many people crowded around remembering shoulder pads, which hadn't yet come back quite yet, and ankle strap shoes and various things of the period, that someone there said, "You know, this is a book." Well, it took about a year for that to germinate, but I finally did think maybe it might be useful for designers and costumers and people interested in that period. So I hauled out those envelopes, found that the pictures were fresh, they had not turned yellow with time, not curled up at the edges, and the clothes were so graceful, they were so lovely. They were feminine and becoming, and oddly enough, they were classic. They don't look odd today, and this is 50 and even 60 years later. So I put them together in a book and included some chapters that have nothing to do with fashion, but that kind of depict the period, the years of depression, what is now called the golden age of movies, and World War II, the Hollywood Canteen, a visit to the White House with the Roosevelts, going back there with Jean Harlow and Bob Taylor, Some wonderful adventures that kind of epitomized that period. Even a chapter about the Blacklist called Hollywood Fights Back. And the book has been out, it's now in its third printing, and it has a surprisingly warm reception. I thought it was just really intended for people who love clothes. Turns out everyone loves that period of movies, and I've been so warmed by the reception it's had. Let me just say, thanks Tim for mentioning it, alas, a dozen copies got lost in the mail between Memphis and here, and we hope to have them here for anyone who might want to buy a copy. Makes a great Christmas present, by the way. So what instead we can do is to offer you an order blank. And if you would like a copy, see this beautiful lady in the sort of jade green outfit. And this is Lynn Brighton, my dear friend and helper. And she'll be happy to give you an order form you can take home, read about it, see if you want to order it. And if you do, I will happily autograph it and get it to you. Thanks, Tim.
Carol, working with Rock Hudson, Kirk Douglas, The Last Sunset. Tell us about that.
It was great. What can one say? It was a movie called The Last Sunset, directed by Bob Aldrich. And I was 17, and I was hanging out with Kirk Douglas, and Rock Hudson, and Dorothy Malone, and Joe Cotton. And I was in Mexico, in a little town called Aguascalientes. And I learned to speak Spanish because the crew was all Mexican, and nobody wanted to hang out with me because I was just a kid. And we also had Neville Brand and Jackie who, they shared the honeymoon suite at the local hotel. I used to have dinner with them every night, and then they sent me home to my mommy. They were quite a pair. So it was a good experience. We were in Aguascalientes for about 3 months, and then we were in Mexico City for 3 months. And we shot at Churubusco. So it was, not only an experience making the movie with those people, but it was the first time I had been outside of the country in a very long time. Or ever, actually, ever. And it was just, kind of exciting.
Okay, questions? Any questions out there? Okay, let's talk a little bit about the soaps. Carla, the people I've talked to before, because of all the lines that has to be learned and many pages that you go through in a day, what's the daily routine on a day of working on a soap?
Tim, that depends on the company. I've done several, so there are several routines. When I did Days of Our Lives, their program was to rehearse the entire show as a play, and then to shoot it as a play. And they would only allow the director and the actors a rehearsal before take and then a take. So you got through approximately at 6 o'clock in the evening. That was their form. When I did Another World, which was an hour and a half every day, and that's because we were preparing to launch the show Texas. In that case, we rehearsed and shot half of the show, and then took a dinner break, and then rehearsed and shot the other half, but not necessarily in sequence. There were so many sets that you would actually shoot all of the scenes that were in that one set at that particular period. As far as memorizing lines, everybody has their own technique. I never thought that I was a particularly quick study, but when you have 30 or 40 pages a night to memorize, you start getting quick. And that's what I did for 2 years. I memorized that much, and I didn't find difficulty with it, and I never wanted to use cue cards because I find that really distracting. I also found that I began to almost see pages in front of me. I could almost see my brain go There is another thing that happens, though, is that because there's so much dialogue going through your head, you literally forget what you've said. It completely erases, and you go on to the next day. When you're doing a continuing drama, whatever you've done the day before is in a way a rehearsal for the day that you're shooting. And that becomes terribly convenient. And that's why characterizations in soaps can become so rich, because you have all of that background to draw from. I like the form. It's very spontaneous. To use one of Donald's words, danger. There's always danger because it's happening so fast. So I hope that answers the question.
And Don played Adam Drake on The Edge of Night for 10 years, and that was shot live.
See, that's an oxymoron.
Okay, explain this to us then.
You know, that's a phrase that people use all the time about it being live on tape. There's no such animal. It's either live or it's on tape. And I did 10 years of The Edge of Night live. The reason I kept it live until 1977 was because at the same time I was doing theater in New York. And 4 o'clock came every day, which means I could go to the theater and do my work. I knew that if they went to tape, they'd be taping until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and therefore I couldn't do theater work. So I did it for 10 years. I did 1,748 of them, and 48 pages a day in every other line, mostly in it. I did 105 consecutive shows, and the 105th show, I did a 48-page speech. I was the only one to talk for half an hour. And so it keeps your mind awake, it keeps your utensils oiled, and it brought the money in, which educated the kids.
Now, after 10 years when you left, how did they bump you off?
One through the heart. Very, very simple. Because I told them they said they had to go to tape because they didn't have a facility to do it live anymore, because we went from CBS to ABC, and ABC did not have a studio in New York that had the live facility. And I said, well, guys, you know, I'll hang around to the end of the year, of this year on my contract, but I would appreciate it if you would let me out. Following Monday, they said you get one through the heart. And that was it. Boom. Nobody ever knew who had shot me. It was all, that was it.
So was I.
Questions? Any questions from the audience? Janet Jones in the back.
You mentioned as children. What do you do? Don't let children.
I didn't even hear the question.
I'll repeat it for you. I have 2 sons, Christopher and Douglas. Chris works for CBS Productions, and my son Doug is an actor and a singer. Very good.
And Douglas looks just like you during the Code 45 days. Questions? Yes, this lady.
When you were in New Jersey, where and what did you, what theater were you in?
When you were in New Jersey, what theater were you in?
Paul Sorvino Theater. We also did a play at the, what is the?
So you were in the paper mill?
No. Not at the paper mill. I never did play the paper mill. Yeah, it's a great theater. Yeah.
Okay, questions? Any questions out there? Well, Colleen, the other day we talked a little bit about this, but we do have some new faces out there. Tell us about working with Victor Mature in The Kiss of Death, which is a classic.
Well, Kiss of Death, another one of those great, I was so doggone lucky.
You are.
Oh, to be in these wonderful pictures. I thank God. Anyway, Kiss of Death is a highly acclaimed film noir semi-documentary which was filmed in 1947 on location in New York. And it was very exciting for me, a little farm girl from Hutchinson, Minnesota, to get on the train and ride all the way to the Big Apple, my first time there. And it was very exciting. And working with someone as famous as Victor Mature was important. And Henry Hathaway was the director, and I had heard about him that he was tough on actors and could be mean, but that he knew his business. I had studied very hard for the part, and I every spare minute I studied and concentrated on it because I really wanted to do my very, very best. And there was a scene with Victor and me in the kitchen of the home in Queens, which was a real house in the borough of Queens. And Henry Hathaway was not pleased. And he said something sharp to me, and I burst into tears. And I ran upstairs, and Henry Hathaway came lumbering after me. He looked like a kind of a grizzly bear, a bearish kind of look. And he came over and he says, "Don't cry, honey, it's all right." And he put his arms around me, and he was a big teddy bear. He says, "You're all right, you're doing fine, just stop crying. Stop, don't cry anymore, honey." And so I got over it, and we were the best of friends. He was tremendously kind and considerate, and it was a great and wonderful experience. I don't know how many people in this audience have been to Sing Sing, but I have been there, and I got fingerprinted. And, some of the film was shot in Sing Sing prison, and that's a pretty awesome experience too.
What about Mature?
Victor Mature is a very great guy, and I had heard he was a womanizer. And so, sure enough, he made a pass. And here I was a young married woman with a child, so I let him know very definitely that I wasn't that type of person. So we got along fine, and he called me Old Mother Hubbard. And he put up he had the biggest hands in the world. They were like, I put my hand up like this, and it was like putting, against his hand, it was like putting your hand in a catcher's mitt. It was so enormous. But he was a very nice person, and I enjoyed working with him. Once we got past that little thing, we did 2 pictures together, Kiss of Death and Curry at Furnace Creek. Kiss of Death was his favorite, and by all means, that's the picture that he's remembered for, I do believe. And it was a pleasure working with him.
Carol, I've heard a lot of stories about Irwin Allen. How much was Irwin on the set of the Poseidon Adventure?
Irwin was very much the instigator, the persevere. Actually, when we started filming, he ran out of money, and he got $6 million from the bank while we were shooting. He did all of the second unit. He was an old-fashioned producer who had done, I guess, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and sort of things in the 50s and early 60s. And then had a long dry spell. And so when he started Poseidon, no one quite knew what to make of the movie or Irwin. And he had the most fantastic hairdo, which a friend of mine and I have always, we would try to figure out how it happened. It went up and down and around and swirled. And I had more than one bald spot, I think, you know. And you couldn't mention it to him because he was quite vain about his appearance, but you couldn't take your eyes off of it. And you'd sort of sit looking at his eyes like that, and you were always sort of like looking like that. But he was very dynamic. He was very much an old-line, old-fashioned producer. And he's not with us anymore, but I see his widow, Sheila, quite often. And whenever we have Poseidon events, like AFI gave Ronnie Neame, the director, an award and all of that. It was Stella Stevens, myself, and Roddy McDowell, and Red, and the guy who did all the sets, and Ronnie. And we always salute Irwin. We call him our fallen captain. And you asked. Sorry.
Did you ever see Beyond Poseidon Adventure?
No, I never saw it. After the first Poseidon was out, Irwin had me come to his office. And he said, Carol, I'm making another Poseidon. You've got to be in it because you're one of the survivors. And I said, well, what's the story, Irwin? And he said, well, you see, you and the other survivors take off in the helicopter, and you're brought to a hospital in Switzerland where you're all treated for your various injuries. You, of course, will be shocked. And then I said, great. And he said, and then you have to go to another town in Switzerland to the Greek owners of the ship. The ship owners were Greek, apparently. This is a big disaster movie, drowning trial. And he said, and all of the survivors get on this train, and they go through a tunnel, and they let on internationally well-known movie stars. And then they go through another tunnel, and then there's an avalanche. And the rest of the story is the survivors plus internationally well-known movie stars then try and dig out of the avalanche. And he didn't make that movie. I think that would have been a much better movie. He made the movie Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, which was in the beginning of the movie, Gene says, no, come this way, and then there's a group of people, they say, no, we're going that way. And in the other movie, it's about those people. And I don't think anybody's ever seen it. Why he decided not to go with his first idea, which is pure Irwin Allen, I don't know.
Now, were you happy with your character? I think I remember you talking before about your scenes were cut, a few.
Well, I had one scene in the middle of the movie that he cut in half, which wasn't really too good. But that's up to the discretion of the producer and the writer and the director, the editor. And I've already done my work, but I found my character a bit of a wimp. I was always saying, no, I can't, And I'm not really like that very much as a person, number one. And number two, I am a very good swimmer. And I just hated saying, but I can't swim, And I hated being afraid all the time because I'm not really that kind of a person. And I felt that the other characters were so strong. I thought Stella's character and Ernie, and I thought mine was the weakest. But it was such a pleasure to be part of the movie that is really crying over spilt milk, truly.
Okay, questions? Any questions from the audience? A shy bunch. Don, you did 2 films with Fred McMurray, Follow Me Boys and Kisses for My President, for Disney. Tell us about that.
No, Kisses for My President, I think it was Warner Brothers. And the other one was Disney. Well, Fred McMurray, I was a kid, I grew up, he was one of those people in films that I admired, I emulated, wanted to be like. And when I met him, my introduction to him, and I tried to talk to him, and my voice came from somewhere else, it wasn't me. And so I was very nervous. And he put me at ease immediately, and I must say that making a film with him, of course his cheapness, is legendary. When we were doing one of the pictures, in those days I was smoking a pipe, and Fred was smoking a pipe. So I was sitting down, and we were out on location somewhere, and Fred looked over at me, he said, do you have any extra tobacco? And I said, yeah, here, and I gave him my pouch, and he filled his pipe. And so he filled his pipe from my pouch for the rest of the day, and for the rest of the 3 days that we were on that location. And we got into the studio one day, I'd forgotten my tobacco, and I turned over to him and said, oh, Fred, do you have any tobacco? And he opened up his pouch. He said, I just have enough for myself. That was it. And he ate peanut butter sandwiches in the back of his car. That was Fred McMurray, but what a lovely guy. What a generous in every other way, but he was really close to the best.
And wasn't there a scene where you two were walking and you were giving him a suggestion of how to do it.
Yeah, well, that was when I first met him. The first scene I had with him, we're walking toward the Oval Office in the White House. And we were just running lines, and we were walking toward the thing. We got kind of tangled at the door, and I said, well, you see, and I started to direct him. He said, well, I think if you just let me precede you, it'll all work out fine. And by George, it did.
And I believe in Follow Me Boys, Kurt Russell played you as a little boy. Is that correct?
That's correct. He played me as a boy.
Yeah. Questions? Yes, sir.
Various actors, so you worked with, who were 2 or 3 of your favorites?
This is for Marsha. Name 2 or 3 of your favorite actors that you've worked with.
Oh gosh, there were so many, and they all had strong points and some weak points. I don't know that I do have a favorite. Let me think. It was wonderful working with Gene Kelly, for instance, in pilot number 5, but he didn't dance a step in that one. It may be his only non-dancing role. He may have had another, but he was very happy. He didn't have to do any rehearsing and practicing. I loved working with Franchot Tone in the same film, pilot number 5. It was an interesting film. Van Johnson was just getting his start in that one. Oh goodness, I can't even think. John Wayne was certainly a pleasure to work with, but there was nothing extraordinary about him. I think his just sort of regular feller persona is what made larger and larger over the years, kind of endeared him to America, that he was not an extraordinary man. He made the most of being a very strong, average guy with a quick temper and a certainty of what his values were, his principles, and he came to stand for that, didn't he? I adored working in the same film with Laurence Olivier in Pride and Prejudice, but we didn't have a single scene together, alas. We did chat briefly on the set. And let me see, Walter Pidgeon was a darling. I enjoyed working with Van Heflin. I'm going to name too many of them, and they all had, as I said, endearing points. I did 3 films with James Craig, one of which films we saw last night. Lovely film with Margaret O'Brien at the age of 6. I enjoyed working with. Well, all of them, really. I'm sorry I can't name a particular pet. Lynn, have I left out somebody? Oh, Gregory Peck, my goodness. All right, in Valley of Decision, which is a film I hope you all discover if you never had seen it. It's one of the finest casts I ever worked with. We were naming casts a minute ago. Let me just give you a rundown of Valley of Decision. It starts with Greer Garson. That was the 3rd movie I did with Greer. The first was Pride and Prejudice. The second was Blossoms in the Dust, my second suicide. And then in Valley of Decision, there was Greer, there was young Greg Peck, there was Dan Duryea. You remember what a wonderful villain he made? Marshall Thompson. You remember Daktari, a series set in Africa on television? Marsha was just out of college then. We played twin brother and sister. And we were the spoiled children of a Steele dynasty family. I don't know, there bore any resemblance to the Carnegies, but Donald Crisp, great old character actor, was our father, and Gladys Cooper, elegant, exquisite Englishwoman that played our mother. She was voted some years before in England by the English people the most beautiful woman in the world, and she still was. Then there was Lionel Barrymore, there was Preston Foster, and and toward the end of the picture, Jessica Tandy. as a young woman, and this was before Streetcar Named Desire on Broadway. But what a cast! And I have to tell you, I had to, at the start of the picture, Greg Peck comes back from a trip to Europe, and the family doesn't know he's home yet, and he just arrives and calls upstairs, and I run out of my bedroom at the top of the stairs, see who it is, and slide down the banister into his arms. Well, I had slid down some banisters before in my life, and I knew the way to do it. You straddle it, and you go down backwards. Yes? Any other banister sliders here? That's the accepted way. Not to take Arnett, who was our director. He thought it would be nice if I slid down facing the camera. Well, it was a two-story slide, and the steepness of it was terrifying. Besides which, he wanted me to ride side saddle because I was wearing a bustle. Now, looking at where I was going, sliding down 2 flights, and side saddle terrified me. I was sure I would be killed. So I thought I would practice, and I went up a couple of steps and slid down, and then, well, tried 3 steps, 4. After a while I was working my way up to the top one, I began to be very sore. And I realized I had been sliding down, hitting each time the corner of the post at the bottom of the banister. I retired to my dressing room and found I had raised a lump that you wouldn't believe. That was already many colors of the rainbow. So they grounded me. I was not allowed to slide until the last stage, after they had all my other scenes in the can, as they say. And then if I should kill myself on that slide, at least they had all the rest of it done. And I had all those weeks of the movie to work up a dread. And finally the day came, and you know what saved me? The sight of Greg Peck standing at the bottom of the stairs with his arms outstretched to welcome me. It took about 1.5 seconds, whoosh, and it was over. It could have been a pillowcase, but anyhow, we got the shot, and that was among the most terrifying moments. You didn't ask me my most terrifying moment. It just came back, it all.
Okay, we have a question right down here in front.
Do you have any memorable recollections of Louis B. Mayer or Irving Thalberg?
Any memories of Irving Thalberg or Louis B. Mayer?
Yes, I do. We start with L.B. Mayer. This is a man of whom you could say almost anything and it would be true. He's sort of like Los Angeles. You can say terrible and beautiful things about the city and they would both be true. L.B. was childlike, he was emotional, he was selfish, he was maneuvering and manipulative, he was ruthless, he was many things that one can scold and be angry about. He also was a genius at selecting the talents to put together to form the greatest motion picture studio there ever was. He had a love of film that was never topped by anyone, and he had a sense, I think, of film excellence. He brought together the finest composers, writers, photographers, cameramen, designers, actors, you name it. Every department seemed to be filled with experts who had a sense of privilege working for that studio, and that meant working for LB. Personally, I didn't know him well. I was invited to several parties at his home. I was a young girl of principle. One did not fraternize with one's boss. One wanted not to have favoritism, so I never went, except on one occasion to a large afternoon beach party, which I think is pictured in the book, and it's full of beautiful stars, gorgeous array of actresses. L.B. sent for me after he had seen the rough cut, I guess, of Kid Glove Killer, film I made with Fred Zinnemann's first feature picture. A great director. This was with Van Heflin and Lee Bowman. And LB sent for me, and I thought, what can be wrong? And when I came in, he gave me a great bear hug and said, I didn't know. I've been seeing you do a lot of things, and you play many different kinds of characters, and they're interesting to watch. I didn't know you had sex appeal. You have sex, sex, sex. It scared me to death. And now there were going to be great things happening for me because he had just discovered I had sex. The great things never happened, I have to tell you, but it was an interesting interview. As to Thalberg, when I was 17, brand new in Hollywood, I was invited to my first Hollywood party. It was at the Charles Boyer's home. And it seemed that every legendary face was there. You name them, it was a gathering of all of the great stars of Hollywood. I tried very hard not to look as agog as I felt. And after dinner, as we all were sitting around, and I have to tell you, I was waiting for the witty lines from everybody that they said on the screen. I heard about the servant problem. I heard about where they shopped and the golf game, and that is the night I began to appreciate writers. The wit of those people on the screen was not theirs, it was the wit of the screenwriters. Guess what? I married one. But back to Irving. While we were sitting there chatting after dinner, I began to hear a familiar sound, and it was the sound of a ping pong ball going back and forth on a ping pong table. Well, I was fresh from the school championship in New York City at ping pong, so I found my way out to the terrace. And I beat Irving Thalberg at ping pong, and I beat David O. Selznick at ping pong. And pretty soon, each of them would bet on me against the other. It got to be quite a contest. After that, I was invited to the Thalbergs' home for dinner at their home in Santa Monica. And that was a lovely event because I must have been the baby there by 15 years, I suppose. But they were very kind to me, and I was really privileged to know Norma Shearer and Irving Thalberg as people and not as a major executive. I remember one of them, either Thalberg or Selznick, when we were playing ping pong so hard, one of them said, "Well, Miss Hunt, at which of our studios would you like to work?" Hoping that I would allow one of them to win. And I was able to say, "Gentlemen, I am under contract to Paramount. Who's next?"
Okay. I just want to mention again about right now in room 517, Nightmare Alley is going to be screened, so make sure you go up there and catch that. I want to thank everyone this weekend. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope all of you have had a lot of fun. And let's thank now Carla Borelli, Donald May, Colleen Gray, Carol Lynley, and Marsha Hunt. Thank you very much.